Okay, perfect. Let's get started. It's 11:05, and this is the live panel event, which is coinciding with the launch of the virtual Parents Wellbeing Retreat that's just been launched this morning. The theme of this panel today is mental health related questions. The view is to, take away any stigma there is attached to talking about mental health. And to give parents an opportunity to speak to the professionals on this panel today. So welcome everyone. I hope everyone can hear me okay. As I said in the email when I sent out the Zoom invites, if you'd like to ask a question, I'm going to be monitoring this on this side. If you'd like to ask a question, use the hands up feature, which you can find if you go to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. We do have pre-submitted questions, which I'm going to read out to the panel that have been sent in already for people to discuss. So we're going to take it from there. But, if at any point there's something you'd like further clarification on, or you'd like to ask something about yourself and your own situation, feel free to interject. And I hope I don't miss anyone with this hands up feature. I'm just trying to navigate how I can view the screen. I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be perfect, everyone. Right, so let's get started. So the first question is, okay. Yeah, so we had something sent in from a parent saying that due to the pandemic, as a result, the whole family are feeling much more stressed. Has anyone got any help and advice to offer around that question? Yes, okay. Claire?
My main thing is actually allow yourself to be stressed and allow your children to be stressed. This is an incredibly difficult time and it's been going on for such a long time. And I think there's sometimes with a lot of this conversation around mental health and well-being that there's a lot of there sometimes feels like a lot of pressure to make yourself feel better. And actually, I certainly, one of the ways that I've coped during the pandemic is actually to allow myself to wallow some days and just allow myself to be stressed and irritable and show my children that that's okay because we're in a stressful time. And so, yeah, so that would be my main thing actually is allow yourself to be stressed because it is really stressful. And I think putting too much pressure on yourself to feel better can sometimes just add more pressure to the pot.
Okay, brilliant. And Laura's got a hand up, so.
I mean, Claire's already said quite a lot of what I was going to say, which is exactly the same thing. This pandemic has been like, it's nothing that any of us have ever faced before. It's probably for most of us the biggest thing that's happened in our lifetime. I think unless you're old enough to have been around in the war, it would be fair to say this is the biggest and the most unusual thing I've ever faced in my lifetime as a kind of, not personally, but as a global thing. So I think as Claire's just hit the nail on the head, which is that there are so many things to deal with, that don't give yourself a hard time for feeling stressed. The other things I'd say is don't try to be perfect and don't expect your child to be perfect. If you get to the end of the pandemic and your child still can't tie their shoelaces or do long division, it won't matter. It really won't. First of all, there'll be loads of other kids in that boat who can't tie their shoelaces or do long division or whatever it is they're trying to do. And there will be time to catch up. Children will catch up. I mean, if you think about a child maybe who's had, I've got a friend whose child was ill in hospital for a year with cancer. And it seemed dreadful. They were missing so much of their education and everything. But 10 years down the line, he went on and did GCSEs and, A-levels and went to university. They do catch up. They will get there. It's not the end of the world. The other thing I would say is don't feel guilty. You can't be the perfect, none of us can ever be, even in non-COVID times. We can't be the perfect parent, carer, teacher, worker, whatever you are. You really can't. And, baked beans on toast with grated cheese and a few cucumber and carrot sticks is a perfectly well-balanced meal. You don't need to cook up something kind of super amazing every night. There's everything you need in there. There's protein, vitamins, carbohydrates, you name it. It's all in there. Just, don't try to be perfect. Just do what you can, and please don't feel guilty. You're probably all doing much better than you think. And the other thing I would say is, and I know this is something I struggle with as a working parent, I try like sort of 10-20 minutes of real quality one-to-one time will do more good for both of you and your child than 2 hours of what I call half attention. So sometimes my son wants to talk to me and I'm like, oh, I've got so much work to do, and but actually I find if I just stop and give him full on one-to-one time for 10 or 15 minutes, he's satisfied, and then he goes away, and then I can work properly, and I don't try to juggle the two at the same time. So that would be my advice.
Brilliant, Laura. And over to Lorna.
Just to absolutely echo what Laura was saying there, completely agree. Don't put pressure on yourself. Don't feel guilty for whatever you may or may not have achieved in this time, or what your child may or may not have achieved. But also, I think it's been really important to remember, and Laura sort of touched on this, about how this, as Laura said, whatever has been missed out on won't matter in years to come. But it's also important to remember that this is temporary. And this is what I've been telling people in my role as a life coach, is that this will end, and it is ending, and the end is in sight now, isn't it? We've got the dates, and God, I hope we stick to them. But the end is in sight, and things will, I feel like at the moment it feels impossible to imagine life back to any kind of resemblance to what it was. But it will happen, and it is happening slowly but surely. And I think it's going to be difficult. There's been a lot of people have been really anxious about the whole situation since when it started. And at some point, there's going to have to be kind of a realization of, I don't need to worry about this anymore. I don't need to be stressed about this anymore. And I feel like that's going to take a bit of a conscious realization to think, oh, that's over. We're out of it. I think people have got used to this default setting of stress right from the start, right from when, if you go outside, if you go to the shops, you might catch COVID. And there is that default setting of stress that I think a lot of people have been in for the last year. And at some point, we need to kind of assess the situation and say, okay, we don't need to feel stressed about this anymore. This is as over as it can be. I know it might not be completely over. They're talking about we might have to be careful in winter time again, but let's deal with the situation as it is. People are getting vaccinated. And there will be a time, hopefully pretty soon in the next few months, where you can kind of just try and relax and try and think, okay, the situation is not as it was, this time last year. We're nearly dead on a year since lockdown started, and it was quite scary. And soon we will be back to this as close to normal as we can be. And just Laura and I've forgotten the name of who spoke first. I'm so sorry. You talked about how to allow yourself to be stressed, and that's good advice, but also allow yourself to de-stress as well, and just realize I don't need to be stressed about this right now, and just try and take a breath and realize what's going on, that the situation isn't as bad as it was. As Laura said, it doesn't matter what you've achieved, what you haven't achieved in this time. Everybody's been on pause, so don't judge yourself at all. And I've talked for far too long.
No, that was brilliant, Lorna. Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, just a quick one to echo and to carry on with what everybody else has said. Just a bit of practical stuff, really. We've really enjoyed doing things as a family together, but it's really been really important just to do things on our own sometimes as well. Sometimes family stuff works, sometimes on our own time stuff works, and sometimes routine has worked, and sometimes no routine has worked. So anything goes, really. I think good is good enough. For example, today, we finish here at 12. It's sunny outside. We're going to get out, and we found that just getting out has been a really positive experience for us. So, yeah, we're all doing fantastic, and we should all give ourselves a pat on the back, I think.
Thank you, Karen. So I'm just going to go on to just on a personal point of that, I've actually wrote about my experience with going through this pandemic, and I've felt it's been a little bit like some days you're decorating and you're making banana bread and you're doing crafts, and then other days you're just eating a ridiculous amount of chocolate and watching so much Netflix, and it was a real up and down experience for me, and I found that quite confusing, that up and down, and not having that, you know, constant. And I'm quite an up and down person anyway, naturally. And in writing about it on the parent portal, there were so many parents who said, God, that is exactly what I'm doing. I'm one day I'm a superhero, the next day I don't brush my hair, and I'm missing people I don't even like. So I think that is quite a normal thing. And I think if you're going through that yourself as parents, lots of us are, and it isn't strange and it isn't abnormal, and you're not cracking up. So just have some faith in yourself, and faith in the emotional roller coaster that we're all going through, that it's completely natural, it's completely fine. And that your banana bread is amazing, so you don't have to keep making it and perfecting it.
And also, you can buy banana bread from the shops as well. Actually, it's fine. It's fine to buy Aldi banana bread. It's absolutely fine.
And take a picture and put it on social media and say, yes, this is what we've done today. This is how. And that's another thing, social media does, you know, everyone shares the highlights reels of the lives, and sometimes it is quite easy to compare and go, oh, these are doing amazing, they're, you know, they're doing 20-mile hikes a day, and they've redecorated and built an extension and things like that, and yeah, it's nice and it's good when people are doing so well, but don't feel bad because you haven't done. Everyone's circumstances are completely different, and everyone's children and the things that they're you know, the responsibilities. So yeah, we're all doing great. We just tell yourself that, even on the days when you're probably not doing so great, you can think positive.
And also people will share when they've had a good day, and, like, you know, we've done so well and blah blah blah, but you're less likely to share if actually what you've done is trodden on Lego and screamed at your children. And actually, I would reckon for every one positive post, there's probably 19 people who aren't sharing what a really rubbish day they've had.
Yeah.
But I would say about social media, it cuts both ways, because on the one hand, if you just look at your general friends' social media and they're all like, you know, as you know, as you're saying, we made banana bread and then went for a 5-mile hike, it's really depressing. But if you actually use, and I think the VICTA parent portal and some of their other social media pages of parents, I think if you put on there, I had a really bad day today, you will get lots of sympathy and you will get lots of support from other people who can understand as well.
Yeah, 100% on that. I think, you know, if you do feel like sharing the bad, sometimes I find that as writing about mine and Scarlett's life, like I've done religiously now for the last 7 years. I obviously write so much positive stuff about Scarlett and what she does and what she achieves. But I also write the bad, and I think, you know, even though I'm kind of laying my life bare, you know, out into the world in that respect, I just think it's important sometimes that people read other people's bad experiences and can go, I don't feel so bad about my own then. And I just think you find solace in, it's like online peer-to-peer support, really, isn't it? It's like having a friend that comes around and goes, my day's been rubbish too, and you just feel a little bit better, you can kind of share in it. So yeah, we'll move on to the next question, just so we manage to get all the pre-submitted ones in. So this question has come in saying, what do you think are the most important things families can do to support their teenager who is becoming aware of their vision loss? So this is in terms of a progressive loss, so they're not, obviously you all understand what I mean by that. Lorna?
That was quick. I think, kind of going back to the previous point of allow yourself to be stressed, I think allow your, if I may say so, allow your teenager to be pissed off. You know, allow the fact that anything degenerative is going to be frustrating, and there's always going to be issues around that, and to kind of allow the emotional journey of that to be whatever it needs to be. But at the same time, it's a really hard one to try and look at the positive, isn't it? It's not an easy one to say, well, look on the bright side. There maybe isn't a bright side. So I think it's and just being there, being a person to talk to, being a person to vent frustrations on, hopefully verbally, of course, and just kind of, yeah, anything. I feel lucky that my vision loss was not degenerative. I think it's much harder for people who are in that situation, and I think you have to allow. And there might be a bit of a roller coaster of something a lot of teenagers go through is lack of acceptance, is still trying to do whatever it was they were doing before, trying to struggle on with smaller font sizes or print when they really should switch to Braille, or Zoom on the computer screen where they really should be using a screen reader. I've come across this a lot, and I think try and encourage them towards acceptance. Oh, I'm so sorry. The joys of being at home. Shush, man. Shush. Yeah, I mean, I think I've pretty much said what I wanted to say anyway. But yeah, it's never going to be an easy journey. But I think acceptance is it's a target, if you like, to try and get to accepting of what's going on, limitations, which is never easy.
Okay, thank you, Lorna. Over to Elin.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it's important to allow them that space to grieve. I lost most of my eyesight when I was a teenager, and I'm only in my early 20s now and still experiencing that loss. And I think grief is a massive part of it. So it's important to feel that emotion, along with all the other cocktail of emotions that come alongside it, because there are so many. So just allowing them that space to feel all those emotions and reassure them that it's okay to feel like that. It's okay to feel angry or resentful about the situation, and just reassure them that you're there if they, want to talk and when they feel ready to talk. I wasn't very vocal about my experiences when I was in the depths of the most deterioration, but knowing that my family was there for me was just enough to pull me through and make me feel that I was supported, and I think that's really important.
Thank you, Elin. Over to Laura.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really say better than what Lorna and Elin have said from their own personal experiences. My daughter was visually impaired from birth, so she didn't sort of have to go through this. But one thing I would add to all that very valuable information is, first of all, they're teenagers. Aside from anything else, they are teenagers, and having raised two teenagers now, it's a really difficult time for all teenagers, in the same way that when we're talking about the general stress of kind of living with trying to support a visually impaired child through COVID, all families are struggling at the moment, whether they have children with disabilities or not. And teenage years are often really tough, because I think that's the time where a lot of kids, the thing they want more than anything else, just to fit in. They want to be like their peers. They don't want to be different, apart from my son, who wanted to be different, but there's always one, isn't there? And suddenly to find that you need a teaching assistant, or you need large print, or you need Braille or a cane, I think an 8-year-old might just about cope with that a little bit better than a teenager who's trying desperately to fit in. And I think I can only echo what the others said, which is let them say whatever they want without any judgment. Let them just say what they want. And also, one thing I've learned from bringing up my own children is they're not always looking for a solution, and you may not have the solution. I don't want to use my cane. You may not have a solution for that, but sometimes they just want to rant. They just want to really be cross and shouty and rant at you, and they just want you to listen and not say, oh, but we could get you a blow on, or we could, they just want to be listened to. I would say, if you can, try to find ways for them to speak to other teenagers who are in a similar position, so they can support each other, and really to support them with all those kind of teenage issues that they're going through, like clothes and skin and hair, because all of those things will still be really important to them. It won't just be about their sight. They're going to want to look like, they might not want to look like the other kids. They might want to have a personal particular expression, but to support them through all of those things as well. And the other thing I would say is technology. There is so much technology that has opened up the world for young people with VI. And to make sure they know they can still study, work, travel, play games, access sport and entertainment. They may have to do it differently, but it is all still possible. And the other thing I would say, and it kind of probably comes back later on, is if you are really concerned about their mental health, is to go to your GP and talk to them, get them to go to the GP and talk with them if necessary. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think being a teenager is not easy, and finding that you're losing your sight as a teenager must be really tough.
Brilliant, Laura. Thank you. On to Karen.
Yeah, we're not there yet, so but I just wanted to share an experience. The lady that I set up Toy Like Me with, Rebecca, she's hearing impaired. She was born hearing impaired and has lost her sight gradually. She's got ushers. And I asked her this question the other day. We had a conversation, and she went off the rails at 17. Obviously, when she was diagnosed as having sight loss as well as hearing loss. But she said yesterday that she would be the person she is if she had sight. She wouldn't have set up Toy Like Me with me. She wouldn't be the creative person that she is. She wouldn't have created Mix-Mox. So she's actually really comfortable with that, and that's her. So thinking along in the future, that's a perspective that I just wanted to share as a positive one. It's a journey. You didn't expect to go on this journey, but actually it can be an even better journey, and it's not a loss. It was actually a gain in Rebecca's life. So I just wanted to share that as an experience of the future.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Karen. Claire?
Yeah, just super quickly. It's kind of following on from what Laura said. Don't be offended if your teenager doesn't want to talk to you, and maybe help them to find opportunities to talk to other people, whether that is a counsellor, whether that's a trusted person at school, whether it is an organisation like More Vision or RSBC or whatever, because sometimes for lots of different reasons, they might not want to worry parents, they might be aware of parents' own stresses and they don't want to add to it. There's lots of different reasons, but sometimes it's really important to find them somewhere else to have that outlet. And I think and let them know that that's okay, and model that it's okay to talk to somebody else. You don't have to talk to me and I won't be offended, and all that kind of thing. So, because I think that feeds into that teenage thing of actually wanting something separate from home and something separate from your parents, and that independence. So yeah, I would make use of any organizations, anything that's out there that might give that young person an outlet as well. I think is really helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But in terms of so with the siblings, so my children are a little bit young, they're not into these teenage years yet, but I know that Scarlett is obviously visually impaired, and she doesn't understand that she's visually impaired because of her learning disability. So she lives in this bubble of bliss where she's always been blind, and she doesn't realize that not everybody else in the world is like that. I found that Sonny, as he's getting older, he's only 9, so he's not a teenager. We do try to talk about it, and we've started accessing the RSBC services now, just to, like I say, just to give him somebody else to speak to. You want to be the hero that solves all the problems all the time, and it can't always be the case. So yeah, that's I'm not teenage children, but that's my thoughts on I agree with what you say with finding that outside outlet. I know as parents, if anyone's ever been counselling, it's nice to chat to your best friends, but sometimes it's nice to chat to someone completely impartial who's not involved. So I would recommend doing that also for teenage children, somebody out of the family unit, somewhere they can be completely open and honest with an impartial person. Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to go on to our next question. So this is one about cane use. So what advice would you give to someone who is about to start cane training, and how did you feel when you used it for the first time? Lorna?
Yeah, hi. I've been thinking about this question since I saw it a couple of days ago, because I think canes are one of those things. Some people are really against using them. I've known a lot of people that don't want the stigma. They don't want to be out and about with a cane, and it feels like you've planted a label on yourself and said, blind person here. Some people really don't see them in a positive way. I remember when I first started using one, and I certainly wasn't massively keen on it. And certainly when I was a little bit younger and I used to go out clubbing with my friends, I did try and put it in my bag as much as possible. But I think the positive thing about it that I always try and tell people if they are against the idea, but I feel that they would benefit from the help of the cane, is actually it does change the way people react to you, which is what people are afraid of, but it changes the way people react to you generally in a massively positive way. I had a friend who started using one really grudgingly, and he was kind of like, it's amazing, like cars were stopping to let me cross the road. And it's like, yeah, people will do that. People will move out of your way, or are more likely to move out of your way if you have a cane. If you have a cane, if you're standing somewhere and looking a little bit lost, if you don't have a cane, people are going to ignore you. If you have a cane, somebody will stop and ask you if you're okay. And that is the kind of thing some people don't want, and I get that, but also it's massively, massively beneficial. I was talking to a visually impaired client recently who said somebody snapped at her for not being in the right queue. Obviously, that's a big thing at the moment, is queuing. And I said to her, if you had a cane with you, they would not have snapped at you. They would not have blamed you. They would have said, oh, you're clearly obviously impaired. The queue is over here. So it does change the way people react to you, but I think in a very positive way, and it brings out the best in people, I think. And I have a dog, as you've just heard. And people will say to me, are you okay? Do you need any help? And I think some people get upset about that, and I don't get upset about that at all. And if I don't need help, I will just say, thank you, but no, I'm good. But the fact is that one day I might be a little bit lost. One day I might need some help, and I might be hoping somebody will stop and ask me. And I think having a cane or having something to tell people that you can't see, even if you can see a bit, but you can't see as well as other people, it's definitely a good thing to have, because one day you might need the help. Quite aside from, the actual physical benefits of having a cane that's on the floor, you're far less likely to trip over, and all the practical stuff. I think a big part of it is how it changes the way people are around you.
Brilliant, Lorna, thank you. Over to Elin.
Yeah, my experience with my cane has definitely been a love-hate relationship. I was first introduced to it when I was 8 years old, and that was only 2 years after my diagnosis. So it was all quite new to me. It was very raw. And yeah, I didn't necessarily understand that everyone else didn't see the world through blurry lenses like I did. So I didn't want that symbol, I guess, of my impairment. So I neglected it for a lot of years, and I absolutely refused to use it in my early teenage years. But I think I needed that kind of experience to let myself become aware of all the other aspects of my vision impairment and come to terms with them before moving on to using the cane and increasing mobility and things like that. So I think I was about 16 when I decided that I wanted a little bit more independence, because everyone around me was speaking about starting to learn to drive and all that jazz. So I wanted that semblance of independence for myself, and I didn't necessarily want to depend on people to guide me around and things like that at that age either. So I just decided to start thinking about using the cane again, just as I think it became a more positive thing for me at that point, that it was a symbol of my impairments, because like Lorna said, it meant that people around you were more aware of your impairment, and that became something I saw as something more positive than negative as I grew up. So yeah, I think it's a process, and it's different for everyone, but I think eventually your cane does become something that adds to your life more than takes away from it, and it's definitely helped me on my journey to independence.
Brilliant. No, on that point, as as a parent, I was Scarlett. We've tried to have a cane in her hand since she was tiny. But when the proper training started and we were using it out in public, I don't mind people staring and looking, but I was a little bit conscious about my little boy, and I did think this is going to draw an awful lot of attention with her being like 5 and jumping around and singing, and she gets an awful lot of attention anyway. But just like Claire, as Lorna and Elin have just said, it was a positive. People do move out of her way now. People aren't as invading her space, which she doesn't quite like, and it has been helpful. People are a lot kinder. to Scarlett and give her a little bit more time, and people are a lot kinder to me as well. So yeah, although it was scary at first, you know, I wouldn't, she doesn't really necessarily use it effectively now at the minute. She is still going through the training process, so it is purely like a symbol cane for Scarlett, and I you know, I've recently lost her, so that was a bit of a mistake, but I wouldn't go anywhere without it now. It is helpful in day-to-day life, and starting her off so young means that there's much more potential for her to have the independence, like you guys said, when she's older. So fingers crossed, all these years of training that she's put in, it will be something that she will use to be a bit more independent as she gets a little bit older. So that's my point. And on to Laura.
Yeah, I mean, to echo what everyone else has said, my daughter got a cane at around the age of 8, and I think absolutely it was easier because people, instead of kind of being cross with her for bumping into them, or, you know, maybe walking into their child or dog, would completely understand that this, you know, this was a child who had a visual impairment. The slight downside to it was that I found people stared. It's quite unusual to see a child with a cane, especially if they're young. And we would get the classic kind of what I call head turn, whereas people would be walking past you, and as they walk past you, they would keep turning their head to keep looking. And I used to find that quite rude and upsetting. And sometimes I used to do it back. I used to kind of turn my head back. But actually, what of course I realized afterwards that my daughter was completely oblivious of these stares. And actually, at one point, she said to me, "Mum, when she was a teenager, she said, I don't want to know if people are staring, if I'm really honest with you. It doesn't bother me. I don't care." So we just kind of learnt to let that go. But if you have a younger child, there's a bit of a kind of hoo-ha about whether canes should be the proper white cane or white with red if your child has both hearing impairment and visual impairment. But at the end of the day, if your child is happier using a cane which has the colours of their favourite football team, or butterfly stickers, or is pink sparkles, or we went through a zebra striped cane stage at one point, I would say just let them use it. You'll probably find as they become teenagers, they're going to grow out of that and think, actually, you know, the last thing, I don't want to see be dead with a pink sparkly cane. I'll just stick to white. But we went through 3 or 4 years of pink and blue and sparkles. Decorate them yourself, stick stickers on them. Obviously, leave enough of it that it's you know, obviously a cane. But yeah, you can get coloured canes now, and if that's what your child's happier with, I would say just let them use them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. Now on to the next question. It's a bit of a broad topic, this. This wasn't actually sent in as a pre-submitted question. This was when I was discussing with a parent what type of workshop she felt would benefit her. So I wanted to bring this to the panel because it's recorded and relate to the parent who made this suggestion. So it was, what advice can you offer on the topic of friendship, belonging and self-esteem? How do we bring up our children to recognize all that they have to offer and to learn the power of advocacy? It's a big one, that. So I hope that's all right for people to respond to. Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Oh, Claire, you're on mute. Yeah, there we go.
So, yeah, I mean, that is a massive topic. We could spend 3 hours talking about all that stuff. For me, when I'm starting work with a young person and a family, there's a few places that I start, and one is around connection. I feel that connection and their relationships are just so important, and within the family, with friends, with wider family members, I just think for all of us, I think we need that really, really solid base to be able to then go out in the world and do the things that we need to do, whatever our own challenges are. So a lot of my work for me personally is around that connection, around those relationships. And there was a really good phrase that I read, and it was, you know, relationships, not uncompromising independence. So I think it's, you know, there's something that you talk about with younger children, but I think it's true of all ages actually, that you can't encourage independence until children have developed their dependence, because otherwise they've got nowhere to come back to. You know, so if you want your children to be able to go out in the world and be brave and be bold and kind of go and try things and take risks, which is all part of the same stuff, they actually need a safe place to come back to. And I think it's come through all of these questions actually, that, you know, children need to be allowed to be who they need to be when they're at home with their loved ones, with their caregivers. because then that will give them the kind of the foundation, I suppose, to then go out and do the other things that are going to really support that independence and that resilience, and you know, making friends and dealing with all the challenges that come with being a child, not just a visually impaired child, but any child. It's a hard time. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say. That's my first bit. Relationships.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Over to Laura.
Yeah, everything Claire's just said. First of all, there's so much in here. I think I've got three main points. One is to obviously try and make contact with other families with VI children and with VI adults, because they can be really good role models. We've got in our group a number of families where both the parent and child are visually impaired if it's a genetic condition, and you know, we've got rehabilitation workers, we've got a tax officer, we've got all sorts of people, and I think that's a really I think that's really good for their self-esteem, to see that actually you can just grow up and be a parent and have a job, whatever you want to do. So I'd say try and have lots of contact with other VI children and adults and their families at both local and national events if you have access to them. I'd also say really help your child focus on what they can do rather than what they can't do. They will be things they can do absolutely brilliantly, and really, I'd say really focus on, you know, let them excel at the thing that they most love and they have the most passion for, whether that's building something or playing with a particular toy or learning a particular thing or singing or jumping up and down on a trampoline, whatever it is, to really give them, you know, not one of the things I often say with the work I do is, you know, not every child is going to go to university, and that doesn't mean just visually impaired children. Not every sighted child is going to go to university. Not every sighted child is going to get a job. And I always think it's about reaching your child's potential. So your child's potential may be very different from another child's potential, but it's about looking at the potential they have and really focusing on that and encouraging that. And the last point I want to make is about advocacy. I've got this real bee in my bonnet about self-advocacy. So this may be a bit of a contentious way I say this. When my daughter was little, she was really good at self-advocacy. And I remember one day a newish teacher had something on a screen on the thing and asked her if she could see it. And she said, well, what do you think, miss? She said, it's in some sort of like brown writing on a peach coloured background. Of course I can't see it. And I mean, I was quite impressed actually that she had the courage to say that. And so when she was little, she would be quite straight, like, no, I need it bigger. But then as they go into their teenage years, I think self-advocacy becomes quite a challenge for them. To try to be an older child or a teenager in a classroom and tell your teaching assistant or teacher that they haven't enlarged your work properly in public or even in private is very hard. You know, you don't want to be seen to be difficult and annoying. You don't want to appear to be more different from your friends. And I know that my daughter and I've met a lot of other children who've gone through a stage, particularly around kind of 12, 13, 14, 15, up to 16, where the last thing they're going to do is say to their teacher, this is rubbish, I can't see it. Please, could you make it bigger? And I think this is the time where I would say it's really vital that you put into place a pathway that the child can use and will and trust. And this could be a dedicated adult, it could be via email, it could be via the parents. So if the child can maybe email the teacher and say, I can't see this piece of book, that might be easier for them than saying it to the teacher. It might be they have some kind of student support in the school, then they can go along and talk to the student support team and say, look, I still can't see my work, or blah, blah, blah. It might be through you as a parent or a carer to say, you know, and I think a lot of children do start to really advocate well for themselves when they get to kind of sixth form age, where they've you know, come into their confidence a bit. But I would also say teach them by your role model, find out what they're entitled to, and very politely but very firmly make sure that your child's school or organisation, if it's outside school, know that they need to provide it, and let your child hear you advocating for them until they are of an age where they feel they can advocate for themselves. But I've heard so many people say, well, you need to teach them just to say to they're 13 and you need to teach them to say to their teaching assistant, I can't see this. And actually, it's really hard. It's hard for us as parents to do it. So can you imagine what it's like for a 13-year-old in a class to say, I can't see my work? So I would say always look for a pathway that they can use, be it a dedicated adult or by email or via you, that they can advocate, but in a way that they are comfortable with, which may not be public. So that's my probably slightly contentious view about advocacy, but that's what I feel.
Brilliant, Laura. Thank you. Over to Elin.
Yeah, I just want to echo all of that, really. I think it's really important to have that safe space to self-advocate. I was never very great at doing that when I was a teenager, and I found it really difficult to voice if I couldn't see anything in front of a classroom of people who I thought already judged me. So having that person to be able to say confidently to, and like I say, in a safe space is really important. I grew to self-advocate more, especially when I was in sixth form, and that's at the point I became more familiar with other vision impaired people, and I started connecting with others online, and I saw how other people advocated for themselves, and that really helped me on my own journey as well, in terms of identifying what worked best for me, and it gave me the confidence to know that there were other people out there saying what they were experiencing and just showing the world what they were made of, and that was really empowering for me.
Thank you, Elin. Claire, have you re-rose your hand?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you'd not put it down. Yeah. No. Over to Claire.
Just that idea of modelling, I think is really important, and I think that goes even broader than just modelling advocacy. I think it's really important. I think echoing what Elin said a little while ago about grief and loss, and that, you know, the big emotions and what's going on. And I think it's totally okay within appropriate boundaries, you know, not putting your journey onto your children, but I think it's totally okay to model for your children. I'm finding this really hard. I'm going to go and get some support. I'm going to go and talk to this person about it. Or do you know what? I need to go and see my friends, and I need to have my life, and you know, having your own thing. And I think it's true of many parents, but I think particularly parents of children with disabilities, it can become your whole world, and then it becomes your child's whole world. And I think it can be, you know, so I'm not expressing myself very well, but there's something about actually as a parent taking yourself out of that situation and modeling that it's okay to go and do other things and to see other people and have your own interests. And I think that's really powerful for children to see of their parents. I hope that makes sense to people. Yeah,
I completely agree with that, Claire. You know, I remember I started up through Scarlet's Eyes when Scarlet was 3, and I just lived and breathed navigating Scarlet's disability and talking to parents and going to events, and you know, it did get to a point where it was a little bit overwhelming, and I think when I became less obsessive over it and started to kind of say, you know, just silly things like separating my Facebook. So I had like one Facebook's got no visually impaired parents or anything like that. That is just completely my personal one. And then I have the one that, you know, all you guys are on, which is all work related and sharing, and everyone's posts are all, you know, even just altering the way that I access social media was different. And I agree with that, and especially for siblings as well, because they take a lot of the burden. I think it's important to see, you know, there isn't just all we do is constantly fight for our children, and that is all we do, and that's all we are dedicated to. So no, you express yourself very well. I can identify with that point quite strongly. Okay, I'm gonna go. We've got 10 minutes left, ladies, so if we can make these responses brief. So how is the best way to support your child so that they can be the best and most resilient versions of themselves? So if we could all, if you've got an idea for that, can we give like a sound bitey type buzzword thing that might stick in the everyone who's listening's brain? Is that possible? Has anyone got a nice little phrase? Perfect, Claire, let's go.
Something we use a lot is meet them where they are. So I think it's really about just working out where your child is emotionally, developmentally, physically, with everything they've got going on, and meeting them in that place. You can hold your aspirations and you can hold your ideals about them, but sometimes you need to meet them where they are, and that might be very young emotionally, it might be in that grief, in that loss, but meet them where they are, and then they will come with you through. That's my thought.
Brilliant, thank you. Karen?
You know, I'd say, you know, there is only one me, you know, there was only one Charlotte, there was only one Karen. So we're all different. Sometimes that's difficult to talk about. So we've always tried to do these sort of books, You're a Star, the ones that have like different activities. I think these are quite useful in engaging conversation when you don't really know. It's all about no worries, the sort of like doodle books. I know Beth Cox has done one from Inclusive Minds, and things like Surprise Yourself. So I've tried to be a little bit practical and a little bit arty about how children start to use conversation and use art around that. So that's how we've dealt with it.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. Has anybody else from our panel got a point on that last question?
I think what was said earlier for resilience is to focus on what you can do rather than what you can't do. I know that was said earlier. That I think is so important. I feel like as a visually impaired person, you constantly get underestimated. You constantly get, people will immediately think of what you can't do before what you can. And you have to be resilient enough to say, no, actually, I can do this, or I want to try this thing. And to really encourage that as parents. I think I was very lucky with my parents, and they encouraged me to just try things. And God, I used to do all sorts of stuff. And I think that let's try things first. If you can't do something, then fine. But try and do something first for most things, other than, telling them they can pilot a plane. But for most things, if your child wants to try it, let's try it. Let's give it a go. Let's find a way to make something happen. Let's go in with the attitude of why not, rather than straight away, no, couldn't possibly.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lorna. On that point from myself, we recently ran a Building Resilience in Children and Adolescents workshop, which was facilitated from an outside organisation. And they made a very interesting point. I think I can't remember the exact years now. Karen, you might be able to remember. I think they said in the 70s and the 80s that parenting was very different, and they believe that this kind of era of people really struggling with mental health is because of the parenting has changed quite a lot. And we wrap our children up in so much cotton wool, and we try to stop them from facing adversity, that when they go into the adult years and get older, they've never had to face anything, and so they don't know how to be resilient against it. And I always say, when people ask me for what the best piece of advice is, don't wrap them up in cotton wool. Let them make the mistakes. Let them bang their head. Scarlett bangs her head and she never bangs it again. She knows exactly. It's just things like that. Unless you allow them to make their mistakes, just telling them that these mistakes and you need to protect yourself is completely different from them going through that process themselves. So my point on that was, let them make their own mistakes. Don't wrap them up in cotton wool. Let them experience the world in its entirety. Okay, we've got 7 minutes, so we've just got a really quick one at the end. Is that all right with everyone? Yeah, a few minutes left. The last one is, at what point do you feel you need to, would you recommend you go to seek medical help in relation to low mood? He's feeling down, and then these, when he's this feeling down, it's crippling every aspect of your life. I expect they mean by that. So I'll start with Claire.
Yeah, it's exactly what you just said, actually. It's about the impact. It's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel angry, but it's when those feelings, when that mood, anxiety, whatever it is, when it starts to impact on your ability to do the things that you want to do, that's when you need to seek some support. So like Laura said earlier, start with the GP, start with any support agency you've got. Really try to be very clear about what's going on. So is it just 2 weeks? Is it 3 months? Is it 2 years? What is the impact that it's having? What's the severity? What's the young person saying about it? But yeah, it for me, when you need to seek outside support is when it's really starting to impact on somebody's life. It's when it's gone out of a normal emotional reaction to something that's happening and is now starting to impact on their ability to do anything. That's what I would say.
Perfect. Thank you, Claire. On to Laura.
Again, this is such a huge topic, and I should say I'm not a medical expert, but I'm to answer the question literally, at what point do you feel you need to seek medical help? I would say if your child or young person is showing any signs of any kind of eating disorder, obviously self-harm, if they're not looking after their personal hygiene, if they're finding it almost impossible to study, or they've lost interest in hobbies, if they're not having any relationships with other people, if they're older, any hint of any kind of substance misuse, anger, continued low mood, any kind of OCD type signs, anxiety, panic, any of those, if you have any hint of those, and I think you do need to, as Claire says, go and see your GP and ask for a referral. And I'm sure by now everyone's saying, what is the point of doing that? Because the CAMHS waiting list, as we know, is ridiculously long, and you have to be almost in your very last legs to get onto it. But it's still worth at least getting onto the list. And in the meantime, there are some good online sources of support. There's things like Young Mind. There's a good website called Couth that you or your child could use. You may find that there's some local support. I know that Henshaw's are currently rolling out a course called I Can Do It, which is going to look at all aspects of wellbeing for young people. And also, it's really important to look after yourself and promote good self-care skills by example. So, you know, if your child is aware that you're actually having a little walk every day and you're eating well and you're doing things to look after yourself, and be honest with your child, it is, you know, say to them, this is a hard time. I'm finding it hard. I need to do things to look after myself. So I'd say really be honest with them that this is a hard time, but definitely if they're showing any of those signs I mentioned at the beginning, you need to be seeking help for them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. And on to Lorna.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's just been said. I don't mind sharing that I went through a pretty severe depression as a teenager. And I didn't have an eating disorder, so to speak, but my reaction to depression or anxiety is just not to have an appetite. So effectively, I was, I'd always been small, underweight. But I mean, I was 5.5 stone at 16. And that was something like I say, it wasn't an eating disorder. It was nothing to do with any feelings about eating. It was just when I'm feeling a certain way, my appetite disappears. I'm the opposite of a comfort eater. And for me, I wasn't the kind of person that liked to ask for help. And I was very against, when you get to that point, obviously, if you're younger than that, you wouldn't even consider things like medication. But when I was 16, 17, it was then kind of decided, well, not decided for me, but I think I reached a point of not being so against the medication and thinking, I'll give it a go. And it did help. Between medication and counselling, I was pulled out of the pit that I was in, and it was a pretty deep pit that I was in. And I think, I was, like I say, I was very against medication, and I do think it was the extra help. That it doesn't solve everything. I think talking therapies are massively important. We covered that earlier. But teenagers are notoriously not very good at talking, and I certainly wasn't very good at talking at first. It took me a long time to kind of learn to be in counselling, in therapy. But I think, all the signs already mentioned. And just there's a difference between sadness and depression. There's a difference between a little bit of nervousness to do something and anxiety. And I think you can tell that difference. Hopefully you can sort of tell that difference as a parent. And I think you can tell that difference. But it's hard to recognize as a teenager. I think I was depressed for a couple of years before we settled on this is quite serious depression. And I think part of that was my own stubbornness of kind of not wanting to deal with it. And also part of it was just I was a teenager and I'd never been chemically depressed before, and I didn't recognize what it was. So it was a learning curve. And even, this was 10, 12 years ago. We're much more clued up on these things now than even we were then. So hopefully you guys can all kind of recognize those signs when they happen.
Brilliant.
That's helpful.
Oh, sorry. Did you not finish then, Lorna?
No, I was just saying, I hope that's even vaguely helpful.
Yeah, no, I have been down in the dumps, and then I've been, like you just described it, chemically depressed, and they are two very different things. And I was very reluctant myself with medication, and it did help, and at first I did feel like I should just be eating better and do more yoga and hiking more and positive thinking. Sometimes going down the medical route isn't, it's necessary, I believe. So yeah, I completely agree with what you say there, Laura. And just on our final point before we tie everything up, Claire,
Yeah, all I wanted to say, and it's a bit of a depressing note to end on, but one of the things is it's really important to ask the difficult questions sometimes. If you've got a young person in your care and you're really quite concerned about them, sometimes you need to ask the right question to find out what's happening. And you know, in my role, I have to ask young people if they're suicidal or if they're thinking about self-harm, and it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. But I think it's really important to try and do that, and I think as professionals it's important for us to do that. And there is support out there as parents. You can also ring Young Minds, and you can ring some of the other organisations like Papyrus and things like that if that's what you're concerned about, and they'll help you to know how to answer those questions and then know what to do afterwards. But yeah, as a very depressing note to end on, but I feel it's really important to sometimes ask the right questions and not be afraid.
No, it is. It's important. I, you know, Sonny's only 9 now, and I'm thinking, am I asking him the right stuff? Am I making him talk about it in the right way? I think getting him in touch with the RSBC was like me pre-planning for later years, and getting him used to being able to be in this therapy type situation, so we can talk about it. So no, it wasn't a depressing point. It was a very important one. So yeah, that brings us to the end. So it's a bit weird because I'm talking to lots of people and I've not even seen anyone's screens. So I'd just like to thank you all for attending, and everyone stayed throughout the meeting, which was brilliant. So everyone must have enjoyed, but being informed about what we were saying. If anyone's got any questions, or I can't imagine any of the panel here would be opposed to any of the parents who have sat in today. If they've got anything specific they'd like to ask one of the panel members, just get in touch with myself, and I can you know, make that connection for you. So yeah, it was brilliant. Thank you. I do appreciate everyone coming along and giving their time, and you know, to the parents that have been listening today, or people from the organisations. Thank you for coming along. I hope you, even if you just take away one thing from what you've heard today, then I'd feel like it's been a worthwhile panel. So yeah, I will let you all go and enjoy your Saturday afternoons, and I look forward to seeing and speaking to you again soon. Hopefully face to face sooner rather than later. So thank you for that. Bye bye.